Disputes about the existence of ancient giants rise to this day. Many simply refuse to believe in what we have seen because it simply does not add up with our knowledge of history. But more and more finds, we clearly prove the opposite. Giants, mentioned in myths, in books and even in sacred texts, and not easy, but where did the giants disappear and who was able to build these cities? Let's find out. Most modern scientists are somehow reluctant to accept the idea that thousands of years ago, people of tall stature and colossal size walked freely on Earth. Strange though, because no one questions the existence of Robert Pershing Wadlow, who still quietly existed in the last century, known as the Giant from Illinois. Wadlow was the tallest man in the world. His height was 2 meters and 7 centimeters. Photographs of him exist, and many can attest to having known him personally. So why did the topic of ancient giants suddenly become so controversial? According to one of the fantastic hypotheses, on our planet used to live very tall people, which in legends are called giants or giants. And that in the past there was a completely different composition of air, so not only people were characterized by gigantism, but also plants and animals. Depending on the composition of the air, living organisms adapt to better living conditions. But over the past thousands of years, living organisms have gotten smaller. If you think this is just a fantasy version, you can think back to the time of the dinosaurs when most of them had impressive sizes. So why couldn't there have been big plants and giant people? And the strongest argument were and remain historical monuments of ancient architecture, because such houses were built of such huge and massive stones that no human power, witches, can never break them. And indeed, if you visit ancient, ruined cities and look at the ruins of huge, high walls, you realize that it has little to do with our civilization, but what stands out are the massive gates, doors and grates, characteristic of a period when architecture was just emerging, when masons were giants and the main requirements were strength and safety. But if giants existed, where did they live? Where were they able to build their cities? In 1963, archaeologists discovered two cave towns 300 kilometers southeast of Ankara. True, the landscape of this area resembles a lunar landscape, but that's all in Turkey. Here formed very unusual towers of hardened volcanic ash, to which rain and wine gave the most diverse forms. Although, as early as the 9th century yet, the people who lived here began to hollow out the inside of the towers and used them as dwellings. But the real sensation lurked in the depths of Cappadocia. There were discovered giant underground cities, designed for many thousands of inhabitants. The entrances to the underworld are hidden beneath the houses. Here and there on the terrain can be seen vents leading far into the depths. It is estimated that in this underground complex can simultaneously fit 300,000 people. And the largest mine reaches a depth of 85 meters. I wonder why such a huge underground space. After all, there could easily fit a whole underground nation, but why do people hide underground? It is worth saying that to date, 36 underground cities have been discovered in the area. And the most interesting thing is that their plans were carefully thought out. And people who know the area will believe that there are many more underground structures, and that all the cities known to date are connected by tunnels. But personally, the question that occupies me first of all is, why did people create underground cities? Obviously, to hide in them from enemies. But what kind of enemy was that? An earthly enemy could easily drive people out of their underground shelters, starving them or even depriving them of air. But some tales about giants are still able to lift that very curtain of mystery. Semi-stories about giants there are not only in most modern peoples, but also in small tribes that live in the Amazon jungle. In Ecuador, legends are still told about cities of giants, which are hidden from prying eyes in the impenetrable Amazon jungle. Most people do not believe in such stories, but there are researchers who want to know the truth about our history. Benoit Duvernay is one of the people who decided to go on an expedition to find the remains of the cities of giants, which according to legends remained in the jungle. Surprisingly, one of the tribes of Ecuador led Benoit to a strange place where there was a giant pyramid, which rose to a height of 18 meters. At careful studying of the ancient pyramid, it was found out that the pyramid consists of hundreds of huge boulders. Weight of some of stones exceeds several tons. If the pyramid was built by giants, the explanation about technology of moving such heavy stones is not worth looking for. But if we reject this theory, then how to explain the construction of the pyramid? Ordinary people who hardly had the technology to move the huge components of the pyramid. Also, huge tools for construction, which were found at the site of excavations in the Amazon jungle, cannot be explained. If such tools in the hand takes an ordinary person, then to use effectively ancient tools of labor is not possible. It is as if they were made for the hands of giants. By the way, a couple of words about technologies. In Egypt there is a place of Busir, located 15 kilometers from the Great Pyramids of Giza. Here, too, once stood 3 pyramids, built in the era of the 5th dynasty. And in Busir itself, blocks of diorite, a deep hard rock even harder than granite, were worked. In these blocks, round holes were drilled. Only I wonder, with what force and with what material? After all, in order to drill such a smooth hole, you need not only strength, but also knowledge of the properties of the material itself. Of course, people have always drilled, even at the beginning of the Stone Age in granite stones. Holes were punched with obsidian needles. However, the depressions in diorite stones are not drilled with an ordinary drill. Neither you nor I can drill a diorite stone by hand with a ring drill. Both the stone and the tool must be firmly fixed. To make the holes, a special device is required to communicate sufficient pressure to the drill. A simple manual rotation will not achieve anything here, because the channels must be perfectly even to the nearest millimeter. It is quite obvious that the channels were drilled, not penetrated with a chisel and then ground, which quite proves that the people who built this probably had not only super size, but also excellent engineering skills. After all, relatively recently, perhaps one of the most intriguing discoveries of recent years was made on the territory of Ethiopia, an ancient city in the Harla region. Surprisingly, all the buildings had 4-meter ceilings, doorways about 3 meters. Window openings were 1.5 meters. All this caused perplexity to the researchers. Only 8 structures were excavated, but it is already clear that they were inexplicably large. At the same time, the remains of the city's inhabitants were found in the settlement. They are absolutely normal height. True, the problem is different. Found traces of vital activity do not belong to the builders. Their age is only 1.5 years, while the city was built in the 2nd millennium BC. Who were the mysterious builders? A question that has not yet been resolved. The British and Canadians who made the discovery are sure that this construction is not characteristic of humans. One thing, religious, temple, cultural buildings, and quite another, ordinary houses for living. Another evidence in favor of this version can be considered several stone tools. Their weight exceeded 60 kilograms, and their age about 4,000 years. Ordinary African men certainly could not use these hammers because of their huge size. It turns out that in the 2nd millennium BC, on the territory of Ethiopia, could live previously unknown species of people. Many researchers believe that even were found whole skeletons about 3 meters high, but the official science such facts are classified as falsifications. And the most interesting find waited for the miners right under the ground. There was found a skeleton, from the size of which it followed that his growth 3 times the height of the average person. The skeleton's leg bones were measured. Thus, the femur was found to be 4-5 feet long and the tibia 4 feet and 2 inches long. The skeleton's skull had apparently been destroyed by a rock slide and consisted of 2 fragments. How could this have happened? After all, the direct archaeological evidence that can be found in such cities certainly speaks in favor of the existence of ancient giants. But by whom and why were they erased from the pages of history? Share this video with your friends to let them know about the existence of such finds.